We are now officially launching this event. I'm looking at our panel. Very good. Excellencies, dear colleagues, it is our pleasure to welcome you to the International Environment House or online this morning for an event organized within the framework of the World Antimicrobial Resistance Awareness Week. This morning, we are discussing how we can advance the commitments made at the Fourth Ministerial Conference on Antimicrobial Resistance that was hosted by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in Jeddah last week, and advance the AMR agenda with international organizations and partners in Geneva and beyond to accelerate action, foster collaboration among stakeholders and more. And I know that many of those sitting here already work very well together. Let's start by reminding a few words that were mentioned last week, by the Director General of the World Health Organization. He stressed at the conference that what our colleagues also keep reminding us, that 1.3 million people are dying every year from antibiotic-resistant infections. And Dr. Tedros insisted also that AMR action is equally as urgent as climate action. If this is your first time at the International Environment House, let me briefly mention that, or joining us online for one of these events, let me just remind you that this house is the home of the Geneva Environment Network, the oldest of the thematic platforms of International Geneva, supported by the host country, Switzerland, and led by UNEP. We are a network of more than 100 institutions and secretariats based in Geneva, including the institutions that have joined us this morning, that make this region one of the global hubs for environmental governance. This house is also the home of UNEP in Geneva. Our headquarters are in Nairobi, but UNEP has a strong presence in Multilateral Geneva, where also the small UNEP team that leads on AMR is based. Today's event is co-organized with the Health Diplomacy Alliance, a young organization with a strong leadership to support AMR governance. This event will be moderated by Juan Diaz-Naque, who coordinates UNEP work on health and the environment in the Pan-European region. We will first hear a welcome message from the permanent representative of Barbados to the United Nations in Geneva. Mr. Aznake will then take the lead and will guide you throughout the session. Before you are formally welcome, a short reminder, the documents presented, the summary, as well as the video of the event will be made available as usual on the webpage of this event. Throughout the event, those who are online can raise questions by using the Q&A box, and if time allows, we'll use them to feed the discussion. There is also, for who is online, a transcript available in over 100 languages, as indicated in the slide that you can see. So let's now turn to Ambassador Wilson. He could not be in person with us, but he has recorded a video message for the World Antimicrobial Resistance Awareness Week. So let's hear his message.
Antimicrobial resistance is one of the greatest global health challenges of our time. In 2019 alone, it was directly responsible for 1.27 million deaths globally, with children under the age of 5 accounting for 20% of those deaths. Without immediate and coordinated global action, AMR could contribute to more than 39 million deaths by 2050 and could cost the world an additional US $1 trillion in healthcare by 2050 and as much as US $3.4 trillion in lost GDP annually by 2030. This year's World Antimicrobial Resistance Awareness Week must be a wake-up call for all of us to educate, advocate, and act now. We will all be touched by issues around AMR in the future. It is almost inevitable with what is happening. An increase in potentially fatal pandemics and viruses, the emergence and spread of drug-resistant pathogens that have acquired new resistant mechanisms leading to antimicrobial resistance, and a decrease in the investment going to the research needed to protect us through the development of new forms of antibiotics. A comprehensive response to AMR must raise awareness of and education of healthcare and farm workers on the use and misuse of antibiotics. It requires fully operational healthcare systems that actively track emerging risks, a multisectoral and multi-agency approach to healthcare, and adequate resources, both financial and human. We must leverage momentum to implement the political declaration adopted in September during the high-level meeting on antimicrobial resistance, not only to shine a spotlight on AMR, but to turn the heat up on this issue. We must act now to reduce global deaths associated with AMR by 10% by 2030, to significantly reduce the quantity of antimicrobials used globally in the agri-food system by 2030, to collaborate with financial institutions to map existing and catalytic funding from a diverse array of sources, and to raise the modest target of $100 million to catalyze the achievement of at least 60% of countries having achieved funded plans by 2030. Why? Because the global economy, which depends on healthy people and animals and safe food, is at risk. If the morality of AMR does not move you, then let the economics of inaction move you. Just let something move you.
Thank you very much. The ambassador is not here, but I would really like to say a huge thank you to Barbados for its leadership, not only when it comes to the global leadership group on AMR, but also on climate change also. A small country, but a massive, massive footprint in terms of sending the message out to the world. Yes, AMR is a very complex issue, and exactly what we're doing here is how do we make it simple? Not only simple, how do we make it compelling? And then how do we make it, when you make it compelling, then people will be taking action. I'm glad that we have the quadripartite agencies. They will be the first ones to take the floor. For those of you who are not familiar with the quadripartite, it's the FAO, UNEP, WHO, and the World Organization for Animal Health. They are, WOHA is online, and I'm grateful that they're actually chairing our One Health Alliance for this cycle. We have a joint action plan, if you're not familiar with that, looking at 6 specific areas that the 4 organizations are looking at. First is how do we strengthen health systems so that we can also address AMR issues. Second one is how do we deal with zoonotic epidemic and pandemics. Third one is how do we look into neglected tropical diseases and also vector-borne diseases. Food safety. Of course, the fifth one is what we call it the silent pandemic, AMR. It's no longer silent if we're predicting that 39 million, more than 39 million people will be dying from antibiotic resistant infections by 2050. That should scare us. And that's why this issue is not just only for the scientists or for the veterinarians or for the UN agency, it is for everybody. People need to be aware of that. So with that small introduction, I'll go to one of the partners, my own home, my heart, UNEP. We have Jacqueline, who's leading our chemicals and health branch in UNEP. And I must confess, UNEP has been leading the environmental dimension of the AMR work in the past several years, including our assembly, which has taken a leadership role in terms of putting it on the political agenda, but also a team of people who are actually devoted in putting this into action whether we talk about the political declaration from New York or the new one now, how do we accelerate the Jeddah 16 commitments? There are a group of dedicated people who are doing that work. So having said that, we have highlighted within our fantastic reports key sectors we should be focusing on. I don't want to indulge into that. I leave it to Jacqueline. Please, over to you, Jacqueline.
So good day to everyone, and thank you, Wendy, for the introduction, and as well as the country that started talking to us. And you will see that when we hear numbers talking about AMR, today we are very surprised about the scope and the breadth of AMR. But the funny thing is that very soon we will get numbers that are bigger. And those numbers are bigger in the deaths, are bigger in the economic loss, are bigger in our ecosystem services challenges. Unfortunately, they are not big enough or getting higher when we talk about finance. And that's one of the areas that we have to further explore. So the very existence of the conference in Jeddah last week is really showing the interest and the potential, as well as the need to act very, very quickly on AMR. The threats, as I was mentioning, are growing, and they are growing very, very fast. Just to add, maybe 3 people dying per minute if this continues like this. So that's not a joke at all. And we tend to forget all of those things. So concerted actions are really needed, and in a One Health approach is a must-have. We also know other numbers, like if we are investing in One Health strategies, every $1 that we invest, we can get revenues or profits of $8. So the equation is there. The issue is how do we do to act as fast as we need. So we are moving forward with this renewed sense of purpose, knowing that while the AMR problem is very, very big, there are commitments that are also very, very big. And the Jeddah commitments last week, the 16 commitments, are the reflection of that. So, yeah. This story, as you heard, did not start last week. It has really been with us for a very, very long time. And it, last year, 2 years ago, oh my God, in 2022, we launched a report, and the title of the report is Bracing for Superbugs. And the objective of having such a report was to start highlighting those environmental dimensions that makes also AMR a big challenge. So we always tend to be looking with an anthropogenic sense, and sometimes we forget that environment can really be at the generation, transmission, and spread of antimicrobial resistance. And for that, there are actions that we need to take collectively that can really guide us in the sense of avoiding those threats that come together hand by hand with the AMR agenda. So this report, as you see in the photo, was launched in Barbados in 2023. And it was launched at the event, the Global Leaders Group event, that has been guided exceptionally and fantastically by Barbados and Malta. So it's me managing this. Yeah. So what are the results of the report? You'll see there in the bullets that there are 3 economic sectors and value chains that are critical for this agenda. Of course, the first one always relates to manufacturing. And you will see later that we are all in the quadripartite talking about prevention. So prevention is key. When or where does that start? It starts with manufacturing processes. And this is not only talking about the pollution that the manufacturers can embrace or can take, it talks mainly about the solutions that they can provide with alternatives, with other ways of thinking, and with doing things in a manner that can really contribute substantively to addressing this aspect. If we look at open spaces, and we have the whole food production and agricultural sector, which is also key. And this goes from the runoff, from the aquaculture situations, from the excessive use of antibiotics in certain practices. And we have some countries that have banned those things, but in many others, that is not happening. And this involves also manures. And if you look maybe back into your own countries, you might even remember passing by and smelling things and just going through and looking at animals that are not being taken care of in the appropriate way. So all of the production, the food production systems is really critical. And once you have the genes in the environment and you know how bacteria moves and works, and it is just getting close contact for the genes to be transmitted. So it is not that we need to have a laboratory and certain conditions for them to mutate or regenerate. It's a very simple process in the environment. And you also know that this is not something new. It has happened for the millions of years that we have been having life in our planet. So they will survive. They will mutate and they will find ways to really be part of the future ecosystems. Healthcare systems, that's the other big entry point. And I think that that one might have been one of those sectors with more understanding of the situation, particularly because of the patients' aspects. And that sector also includes pharmacies, and it also includes consumers. It's not only the hospitals as such, but the system that goes around that, and the understanding of how things need to be done. So what are the priority actions? And this is not new for anyone. Those are big agenda items that always, when addressing topics that are as big or as important as AMR, always entails. One is, of course, the need to have strong regulatory frameworks, environmental governance strategies, and correct planning in the countries. So this doesn't mean everything needs to be new. On the contrary, we have to use what we already have in place. But there are elements, if we look at the environmental dimensions, that we have to look a little further. Some potential solutions like standards or monitoring or things might be already available. Some still need more evidence and knowledge. So that's also one of the priorities that we have to address very, very quickly. And that involves surveillance and monitoring. It involves research, but it also involves countries' understanding and improving reporting of the data that they are generating and what that implies. What are the implications of getting those numbers? Raising awareness, I think that today this is a topic that many people know because unfortunately they might have one person close to them, either family, friends in the city that they are, that have died because of antimicrobial resistance, not being able to have antibiotics that are effective. But what we are missing is maybe the other dimensions of where this can be generated. And I'm referring particularly to the environment at this moment, and that involves wastewater treatments. It involves, in some places, open defecation that goes directly to that. It involves waste generation, contaminated sites, and pollution in general. So pollution can help catalyze the microbes to live happily ever after. So again, what is the most important element here is what are the preventive actions that we need to take. And from the UNEP perspective, because how we are set and organized, we are always trying to talk about value chains. So it is not one specific actor among the different steps that getting an antibiotic or getting the food is needed, but addressing it in a holistic, comprehensive manner. So the journey has been long, and it started some years ago with UNGA, somehow in 2017, if I am correct, 16, even 16. And we had this year the opportunity as well to look from the political perspective, the importance of this topic. And as you know, UNGA hold a high-level meeting on AMR, and there was a resolution that endorsed, approved a declaration that was done also at the highest level possible. And it included the different building blocks that makes the One Health so powerful. So we have animals elements in there, we have environmental dimensions, we have human health, we have evidence, we have all the ingredients that we need to make things move. So what are we doing in UNEP? So because of the results of the report that I was highlighting, we are trying to prevent as one of the key areas and reduce the releases of antimicrobials into the environment. This week is also an example of the advocacy and the awareness raising type of things that we are trying to do, but it's also addressing the drivers and the sources and the challenges of the antimicrobial resistance. In some cases, as you know, there are solutions, but in some cases it's cultural, it's social and economic aspects that guide the direction of action by certain stakeholders, which might not be going into the prevention aspects, but in the quick solution and fast response to certain issues that we have had. And we have observed that with COVID. You know, with COVID, all the issue of using the antiseptics and cleaning our hands, it came like as a very, very important practice, but there are also potential things to think about how those behavior patterns change. The economic sectors that drive AMR, I mentioned that before, and we are trying to really work into the management of those areas, and with those, still baby steps in many of them. The first part, the manufacturing part, is baby steps where we are, but those are in a way agents of change that can really help do things in a different way. So my last slide, of course, is a big thank you to all, because your presence and your attendance online is the reflection of the commitment and the will to move this agenda forward. But again, we are baby steps. We have a lot in front of us, and 2050 is a timeline and time set, but things can get really, really worse if we don't take action now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. Baby steps indeed, but when we put it 3 people dying a minute, we have to sprint. We have to run. This is not a joke, because it is really, that's why in the beginning I said, you know, this is complex, but we need to make it compelling so that people can take action. I'm also very happy to see that most of the priorities proposed by UNEP are actually nicely reflected in the 6 elements of the political declaration from New York, but also I see quite a lot of them in the 16 outcomes of the Jeddah Declaration. So I think we are doing the right thing. So, but we need to sprint, as I said. Now, having said that, let me move to another partner of the quadripartite, WHO. I know Diana mentioned a figure, 1.2 million people dying. And since I work in the European region, also let me give you a figure. You know, most of these figures we have is actually from 2019. It's actually in the WHO European region, bacterial AMR associated with over 500,000 deaths. That's scary. And then if you combine the economic impact in terms of the European Union and the European Economic Area, nearly $11.7 billion of loss. That's an amount we should invest in something. So this is the magnitude. So this is so serious. So having said that, a big thank you also to WHO for the quadripartite secretariat on AMR, bringing all of us together and advancing this work. In that context, JP is the Global Coordination Partnership Department Director. If you could reflect, reflect a little bit on what WHO is doing in the context of this work. Over to you, JP.
Thank you so much for your kind introduction. And I also start by thanking the Geneva Environment Network and Health Diplomacy Alliance for organizing this, and of course for UNEP again to host us. So it's my second time coming to this place, but I still get lost in the parking. Apologies for coming late to the meeting room. I mean, Wanda said it, WHO is one of the 4 partners in the quadripartite organization, and we are proud to belong to the quadripartite organizations actually, because working in a silo, working alone will never be a threat to AMR. Rather, AMR will still be a threat to us. I will not go in the numbers because Ambassador Wilson and Jacqueline and Wanda have said it. AMR is a killer, and the death toll and economic losses are unbearable already. So if they continue to grow, it's going to be a big issue for us. WHO work in AMR goes back more years ago, around 15 years ago or so. But most noticeable milestone was the 2015 Global Action Plan that was developed by the WHO, but that was let alone endorsed by the other quadripartite organization governing bodies. And as you know, that plan is still governing most of our work globally, but also it's also the base of the country national action plans that are still being developed. However, WHO also acknowledged that it's not only work of WHO that will defeat this threat, rather multisectoral approach. And that's why we are proud to host the Quadripartite Joint Secretariat, and we're proud to have very effective partners, UNEP, FAO, and WUHA, and we do a lot of work together. We have our strategic framework that was approved back in 2022, which governs our collaborative work. But if I take a step back to speaking about what WHO does in the human health sector, and most of our partners in the room might be aware, the bacterial infections or the bacterial related death due to bacterial resistant infections, they are most, I would say, pressing. Without saying that we are putting aside the fungal infections or the others, but bacterial has been really earmarked as one of the key threat around AMR. And the last WHO World Health Assembly in May this year approved the strategic and operational priorities to address the bacterial AMR until 2035. So that's the current strategy that governs the work around the bacterial drug resistant infections. And so far, the WHO is trying to emphasize on that and supporting countries to implement that strategy. However, the work of WHO as well goes much into improving the access. We sometimes forget that most of the deaths that we have are actually due to lack of access, not really to drug resistance, but people don't access these antibiotics or these antimicrobials at all. So there are really ongoing efforts from WHO to improve that. One is, of course, to incentivize more drug manufacturing or innovations aspects. But importantly is also to fix the supply chain issues that are there that prevent the drugs to reach the patients. So initiative like Secure, you might have heard about it. So we are also working with different partners, including LDP, to make it work. And of course, working with other partners in the animal health side to try to harmonize our drug utilization policies. So let's say the preserving the drug efficacy, it's not going to be only WHO work, it has to be all of us to work together from the animal, agri-food, and animal health sectors to work together to preserve these antibiotics because we share their benefits. WHO is also emphasizing on the work relating to the data generation and use. So you might be aware about GLASS, which is a system that's widely used, and WHO is continuing to build the capacity of countries to be able to report quality data, but importantly to use the data to improve the systems. So diagnostics is also key because most of the time we just forget that. So antimicrobials without diagnostics, it's also a plan to fail, because then how do you use them? So they have to go hand in hand. Now, the other important area which actually aligns with this week is about awareness, because we underestimate that really AMR is still felt as a complex or even something not understandable by everyone. So awareness raising is one of the key components that actually we share among the quadripartite organization. So the idea is to really mainly target 4 key stakeholders. One is the policymakers. Other one is just the students or the young ones or the youth. Media is one of the key important aspects we have to work with, very importantly. But as well, we've looked into the best way to approach this would be to work with the affected communities, the people we call AMR survivors. You've been probably seen that we're mainly now focusing on really giving the voice, or let's say giving the floor to the people who have felt it, because we lacked human face on this. And so we really applaud their work, the AMR Survivors Task Force. They have been here and there sharing their stories, and we've already seen really great impact. And really, it's a community that is available for all of us to use. They are available, and you can reach out to us, and we can facilitate you to be in contact with them and really give them the voice. We probably should have gotten one today as well. But anyway, so their voices are also available. I might share the link, and then you can go there and really hear it. It's very important to engage them and to listen to them as well. Now, the youth, as well as you know, we have a quadripartite youth working group, and the youth has been also vocal, and we all know that AMR is our issue today, but it's going to be a big issue today, generations of tomorrow. So we have to involve them. Now, coming back to this year, I mean, you'll see everywhere we're writing like 2024 has been a critical or a big year for AMR. To me, that scares me, because that means next year won't be big for AMR. Bigger. You're very optimistic. It can be bigger. I'm happy to side with you. I think we should really push for that, because every year should be bigger and bigger for AMR. In terms of not getting big statistics, rather big or tangible action. And I really count on all of us to really make that happen, because we also know, unfortunately, that some issues were raised, especially at the high political level, then were forgotten. If you want to know the pandemics, they're always like that. There are time pandemic hits, and then we're all there. Once WHO declares it that it's ended, we just forget, and then we'll come back when it hits back. So for AMR, it's there to stay, and it's taking $1 million. We know that already 4-5 years ago, but we have to keep this momentum going on. I think the Fourth Ministerial meeting also brought something on the table which is going to be probably helpful. This creation of a continuity mechanism, a troika, between the past host, the current host, and the future host, to make sure that there is a continuity on how we really take decisions and how we follow through the decision that we have taken. Because everyone in his mind will wonder. I mean, we had a very nice political declaration, as Jacqueline said, and we had the ministerial declaration. I think in terms of declaration, we are sufficiently served. Because if you go back in G7, G20, since 2015, AMR is ever present there. Really. So declaration, I think we have them. Now the question is, will they be implemented? That's what we should all be wondering about. And you all know that one of the key enablers is financing. And if there is anything that we did not get, some very tangible commitments and all of that, is financing. Finance is still a bigger issue. And I think all of us, on the table like this, we should also speak about that and try to come up with some creative and, keep our advocacy to ensure that we get the means to implement these commitments. I think we have, a very unique window of opportunity. We have big ideas coming up. The independent panel on evidence is going to be a very useful mechanism we have on the board. The updating of the gap. We have, I think, the tools and the willingness and the commitments from political level, but we have to make them work, and we have to see the tangible outcomes. So I'll stop here, Wendy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, JP. And I think your last word, we have to make them work. And I know silo is not listed as one of the burden of disease, but this is something that we need to work on. And I think what at least WHO has done in terms of the coordinating the quadripartite in terms of AMR is really commendable. And I hope that that continues. Of course, we talked a lot about AMR death, bacterial AMR. But one thing you said, it's not only about overuse and misuse of antibiotics. There's also a larger picture of actually billions who do not even have access to the antibiotics. So I think that is an area that we should also be looking at. Thank you also for mentioning the survivals of AMR. I think that's one of the best ways to tell the story. I don't mean to do a publicity for WHO, but this is something that has been done by WHO in terms of really documenting what the stories of AMR survivors, and I think that makes it. I kept on saying, make it simple, compelling, so that people can take action. I think these are the things that we should definitely do. So thank you very much for that, JP. Now, having said that, now let me move to our next quadripartite partner, the UN Food and Agriculture Organization. I know agriculture, animal, cattle breeding, and so on has been referred as one of the concerns we have. So, but this is not about blame and shame. But as people said, we could, if we know that is the area where we have a problem, then the bigger question is how do we actually invest more in that area so that we can correct the impacts. So with that small introduction, I give the floor to Dominique, who's heading the FAO office here in Geneva, and a very strong partner, I must say, to the quadripartite, in particular to UNEP, with our Geneva-based Environment and One Health working
dialogue series.
Over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Wendy. It's a real pleasure to be here. And as you said, it's not about blaming and shaming. It's about partnering. Absolutely. And I think this was very eloquently presented by Jacqueline and Jean-Pierre in their previous remarks. And we are delighted to be here today to participate in this event. And we are very grateful to the Jen and Diana at UNEP for inviting us to participate and present the FAO perspective on that. Well, as was said, of course, I will agree with all what has been said by our colleagues, but I was about to say that 2024 is a historic year for many reasons. That AMR, with the UN high-level meeting on AMR, the Fourth Ministerial Conference on AMR, and even the ongoing negotiation on the pandemic instrument, where we are trying to work together to position One Health as an important approach. But I agree that awareness needs to continue, advocacy needs to grow, and I would say should grow pro rata the risk. When we know you were talking of 1.3 million today, 39 million potential death in 2050. So it means really that we need to massively scale up the advocacy, and for that, clearly you can count on FAO. And it's clear that through FAO knowledge, expertise, network, and field presence, we have been committed. We are committed to supporting our member countries to protect the health of animals, farmers, consumers, while of course ensuring food security, nutrition, and sustainable production. And for that, we think that the transformation of the agri-food system is absolutely critical. And if you look at the FAO strategic framework for the period 22-31, we have within that strategic framework 20 program priority areas, and for the first time, One Health has appeared as one of the really prominent program priority area. And within that, of course, addressing AMR and managing bacterial infectious diseases is one of the key pillar of the FAO One Health framework. In that context, what is very important to mention for me is that FAO has been launching something called RenoFarm, which stands for actually reduce the need for antimicrobials on farm. And in the context of RenoFarm, we really aim to prevent and respond to AMR, starting at the farm level, working closely with farmers on what we call the 5 good farms approach. Good health services, good production practices, good alternative, good connection, and of course, good incentives in order to reduce the need for antimicrobials across the food chain and strengthen food security. This RenoFarm initiative has been launched in April 24 in Chongqing, China, and is growing rapidly. We have now over 240 members, be it from civil society organization, academic, universities, research center. Basically, all stakeholders are on board, and 34 countries as we speak from all regions of the world have joined the RenoFarm and are ready to receive and provide support to really strengthen the agri-food system to be less reliant on antimicrobials and have their national action plan on AMRs regularly, I would say, update and monitored. This initiative has what we would call a whole of farm approach to ensure the supply of healthier and safer food for human consumption, derived from not only from animal but also from plant sources that have not been subject to unnecessary use of antimicrobial, and where we also strengthen the surveillance in terms of antimicrobial residues in food, agriculture, and the environment. The RenoFarm initiative actually proposes to strengthen all the related value chains, the dairy and beef value chains, the camel milk and meat value chains, the sheep and goat meat value chains, the poultry meat and egg value chain, and all this through promotion of best practices that can actually reduce the reliance on antimicrobial, while in the meantime enhancing productivity. Because of course this is important considering the need for a growing global population. In the meantime, when treatment is ultimately needed, and this also of course refers to the issue of access that you mentioned, Wendy, and that was mentioned by Jean-Pierre, RenoFarm is also working towards supporting countries to access quality antimicrobials. And in parallel, FAO, we are working to make sure that farmers receive professional advice from animal health experts. AMR surveillance and monitoring of antimicrobial resistance and use is, of course, critical. And in that context, we have an initiative called INFARM, the FAO International Antimicrobial Resistance Monitoring System, which was launched in 2024, and which really is working to support countries in developing and strengthening operational surveillance systems, which are able to collect, analyze, disseminate, and use, I would say, AMR monitoring and surveillance data. And of course, in this we are working close collaboration with the GLASS initiative that was mentioned by Jean-Pierre, and also the Animuse initiative of our OHA partner in the quadripartite. The FAO assessment tool for laboratories and AMR surveillance, ATLAS, provides tailored support to countries to address gaps in laboratory capacity building or establish AMR laboratory and surveillance networks. In particular, we continue to support laboratory capacities for detecting and characterizing AMR, ensuring equitable access to diagnostic for guiding and achieving successful therapeutic treatments. Of course, we also acknowledge that, you know, when you are talking of awareness, when you are talking of appropriate use of antimicrobial, the local level is also very critical. And FAO for the last 30 years plus has had something called the Farmer Field School, which has been used for many things. They initially used in the context of integrated pest management, which also relates to One Health. And now we are aiming to use the Farmer Field School indeed to work on AMR and make sure that farmers, and especially young farmers, are appropriately trained. This said, we have also to acknowledge that despite all the good work that has been done, there are still many knowledge gaps. And especially, this is perhaps especially true for the food value chain. And we therefore need to promote the development of operational research projects to address those gaps and scale up training to promote the prudent use of antimicrobial and the good practices through the knowledge hubs and the virtual learning center. Of course, we will not emphasize enough the role of the quadripartite for that, including in terms of the support we provide to countries jointly to develop their national action plans, and in that spirit, the quadripartite joint secretary plays a critical role in facilitating alignment across partners, while the AMR multi-partner trust fund provides technical and financial assistance. The quadripartite AMR multi-stakeholder partnership platform hosted by FAO is another, I would say, good example of multi-stakeholder collaboration. And we have now about 250 members, again, representing government, civil society, academia, private sector within that. So while I conclude, I would say that, of course, this World AMR Awareness Week is indeed very important, and today I would say today's event is more needed than ever. And again, I wish to reaffirm our commitment as FAO to closely partner with members of the quadripartite to really make things happening, which is always critical in our area at the desired scale, because we need to be able to scale up action. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dominic, for that very, very detailed and useful intervention. I know I started by saying we're not shaming and blaming the food sector. That is not the idea behind it. But I'm very happy that transforming the agri-food system is one of the priorities. Actually, this is one of the things also within the implementation of the 2030 agenda. That's one of the elements that is identified as one of the 6 transitions. And we haven't talked the link between AMR and the SDGs. There's a lot. You can literally link it to all 17 SDGs, how it can impact. But it's great that the transformation of the agri-food system is one of the key priorities. But also improving the food value chain. Value chain is one of the things the UNEP report also zoomed into, and I think it is important that that is also addressed. I also see quite a lot of connection between the Jeddah outcome, whether it is on the independent panel, whether it is on surveillance system, whether it was on the One Health Learning Hub. Much of this work, as JP said, we should work in partnership. And I think this is the kind of knowledge that could feed into that. Last but not least, in terms of what JP said, 2024 is the year of AMR, and then we just forget about it. No, we will not. So one of the things we've done in Geneva, for example, our One Health Environment Working Group, maybe these are the issues that we should continue to pick up and have the dialogue. So that way it is not just left to the resolutions and declarations, but we actually bring in good examples of how this is affecting people and planet, and be able to tell real stories in terms of the impact of AMR on individuals, but also on the planet.
Next time I'll bring an FAO book. Well.
You know, it's funny. The beauty
so
is that I'm not
promoting,
even flashing a UNEP document. We have some of the best documents on AMR in UNEP, but I'm actually doing a WHO publicity here. It's just to show that that partnership is so important, and what is produced in other organization can actually be also an important resource for the rest of us. Now, having said that, I move to a very important partner. Currently, the World Organization for Animal Health, Javier is on screen, and they're actually chairing the quadripartite in this cycle, doing a fantastic job. I also need to shout, and you've done a great job with the G20 One Health engagement. The quadripartite had at the 29th, we had actually a high-level event and bigger focus on climate and AMR, but Jacqueline also has put it in terms of pollution, and I think we should not look at AMR or the One Health approach just from the context of biodiversity nature loss. We really need to look at it in the context of climate impact, but also in terms of pollution. Having said that, Javier, you're doing quite a lot of stuff on advancing integrated AMR strategies, so many tools that is available within WOHA. So I leave that to you. So please, over to you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Once again, apologies for not being there with you today physically, but after 1 week of different travels, it was difficult for me to join you today in Geneva. I really thank you for the invitation, and especially Catherine, who caught me during the Jeddah conference and reminded me of the importance of this gathering. And I also made something like a bet with her, which is trying to provide you with insights about AMR without mentioning some of the keywords that I think you have all already in mind, which are that AMR is a cross-sectorial problem, that we have to catalyze funding mechanisms, and that we have all to work together. So I built my intervention around mostly the World AMR Awareness Week motto, which is educate, advocate, and act now. And I hope that I can educate you, or at least I can inform you, starting by who we are, because many people do not know us, or do not exactly know who we are and what we do. So the World Organization for Animal Health was founded in 1924, and it was founded by 28 countries who decided to put efforts in improving animal health and controlling the spread and development of animal diseases around the world. Today, we have 183 members, and what we do basically is develop international standards. We develop international standards in animal health as well as in animal health and animal welfare. Our principles are transparency, scientific evidence, and international solidarity. and we build capacities within the different countries so those standards can be implemented. And in this sense, with FAO, we work very closely in the implementation of those standards with their activities at the farm level, as they were presented before. And as you have very well mentioned, we are part of the quadripartite since its inception, and we are responsible for maintaining all the different aspects around animal health, welfare. And to that respect, I invite you to have a look to a couple of vision papers that we have recently published on animal health and animal welfare related to sustainable development, as well as animal welfare in terms of sustainable farming capacities. The World Organization for Animal Health, we have a strategy inspired in 4 pillars: awareness and understanding, strengthen knowledge through surveillance and research, supporting the good governance and building capacity, as well as the encouragement of the implementation of international standards. And this strategy is basically based on the WHO Global Action Plan that was adopted by WHO in 2015 and subsequently adopted by our General Assembly in 2016. In regards to the international standards, I wanted to say a couple of words. We have our standards are structured into 2 main big books, one book for terrestrial animals and one book for aquatic animals. And in these books, we have, in each of them, we have 5 chapters dedicated to antimicrobial resistance. And these chapters include specific information on responsible use, how to do surveillance on antimicrobial use, how to do surveillance on antimicrobial resistance, as well as how to do risk analysis. In terms of responsible use, let me tell you how the organization and its members is defining what is responsible use in animals and what is not. Responsible use of antimicrobials in animals, it's use of antimicrobials for veterinary medical purposes. That includes prevention, control, and treatment. Responsible use is not including non-veterinary medical use of these antimicrobials. And in that respect, we are very clear that antimicrobials used as growth promoters is not a medical use and therefore is not a responsible use. In terms of surveillance, we have been monitoring the amount of antimicrobial use for more than 10 years, and this is all available in our global database called Animuse that our colleague from FAO has also mentioned. And according to this database, the animal sector has made a significant progress in reducing the use of antimicrobials as growth promoters, with more or less 70% of our members not using it. But still, we have 11% of our members using high priority, critically important antimicrobials as growth promoters, as well as 3/4 of our members still allowing the use of growth promoters, not using any risk analysis. So this is something that we are very committed to change. And on that respect, I'm linking this to one of the commitments from the United Nations Political Declaration, which is saying that the countries are committing by 2030 to use antimicrobials in agri-food systems responsibly, according to Codex standards as well as our standards. So this is part of the, I'm starting already to do some advocacy, which is the second word of this WA week. And in that sense, I advocate and I thank you, all of you, for the efforts in accompanying the countries and in making changes possible so that this responsible use by 2030 is achieved, including the phasing out of antimicrobials as growth promoters. In terms of how many antimicrobials are also used in the world, as I said, Animuse is capturing this information, and we are today covering more or less 60% of the animal biomass worldwide for both terrestrial and aquatic animals. And today, our main efforts are focused on using the data. We are collecting data from something like 150, 160 countries consistently since 2015, but we are still observing that the number of countries writing and publishing a national report on antimicrobial use has not moved since the last 10 years. It's still around 35, 40 countries. So today we are undertaking a campaign of capacity building in selected countries around the world so that they can write national reports on antimicrobial use, and they can bring these national reports to the competent authorities at the ministerial level. They can bring these national reports to the cross-sectorial mechanisms that they have to discuss. They can put those data in front of the data from humans, in front of the data from other sectors, and that they can make decisions and based on where the impacts are going to be the highest. Last but not least, I wanted to mention also that as an organization taking care of animal health, we must not forget the impact of companion animals in this adventure. Even though they represent a tiny amount of the animal biomass worldwide, they represent today more than 1 billion companion animals in the world, and we see that this is increasing in emerging economies like China and in some countries in Africa. So to that respect, we have prioritized our actions in terms of awareness among the veterinary professionals taking care of companion animals, mainly cats and dogs, as well as surveillance. Because today I was planning to post on LinkedIn a recent article describing the prevalence of resistance in bacteria isolated from urinary tract infections from cats and dogs. And the data are somehow scary because we can see that almost half of the isolates were already resistant to amoxicillin, and almost 1/4 of the isolates were resistant to ciprofloxacin, which I remind to you all that it's a highest priority critical antimicrobial. So in terms of priorities, we have set 4 main priorities. Prevention is the first one, and it's already mentioned in the political declaration as well as in the Jeddah commitments. We have another priority, which is strengthening the surveillance. These are also mentioned in the political declaration as well as in the Jeddah commitments. The other 2 ones are related to the establishment of functional and effective cross-sectorial dialogue mechanisms. As I said before, many of the countries have data, but they are not using the data because they are not sharing those data in the different agencies. And then the last but not least is investment. The investment in animal health systems so that everyone can have access to high quality veterinary services and veterinary products. And by veterinary products, that means vaccines, diagnostics, and medicines. There is one consequence that has not been mentioned during all the different interventions if we do not act now, which is the consequence of economic losses related to the prevalence, to the impacts of AMR in food-producing animals. 6 weeks ago, we co-published with the World Bank a report on that sense. And the main figure that comes from this report is that based on a 5% prevalence of antimicrobial resistance in animals, in bacteria affecting animals, if we do not change the patterns today, by 2050, this will generate animal production losses equivalent to the consumption to the nutritional needs of more than 2 billion people around the world. So this is also something to take into consideration. And I hope that this is, as the intervention from Barbados said, motivates you to do something, whether it's because of moral reasons, because of health reasons, or because economic reasons. We do not mind, but do something now. Thank you very much for your attention, for the invitation, and happy to answer questions at any time.
Thank you so much, Javier. I don't have to add anything to that, but move to the next presenters. You know, none of this work can succeed without the engagement of other stakeholders. It's not just about One Health is not about the quadripartite or the UN agencies. It is about the other partners who are actually doing the heavy lifting at the country level, but also shaping policies and so on. In that context, I give the floor to Judith Moore from the World Economic Forum, particularly on the role of innovation in terms of tackling AMR, but also, what are the incentives available in terms of diagnostics, vaccines, surveillance systems? Over to you, Judy.
So I'm delighted to be here today. Let's move to my first slide. I'd like to start by saying a huge debt of thanks to the amount of work that has been done this year, and take you through how we're thinking about the road to the 2029 high-level meeting and how we move to action and implementation. If you look at the screen, you will notice there's going to be some red writing on slides because a lot of our plans are actively in discussion ahead of our annual meeting to be held in Davos 2025. And we really want to drive action here by creating a platform. So we're taking you through our plans to create a new initiative, a unified coalition for AMR response, which we're calling UCARES. So firstly, most of you will be very familiar with the World Economic Forum because of our annual meeting in Davos that really speaks to our mission and purpose to improve the state of the world. In terms of how we are organised, we have 10 thematic centres. I sit in the Centre for Health and Healthcare, and my role is to drive access and outcomes. But if you look at our 10 centres, you will see we cannot drive effective action unless we reach out to our other centres. When we think about AMR, you cannot think about it without looking at the geopolitical situation. You cannot think about it without thinking about food security. You cannot think about it unless you're looking at advanced manufacturing. And our ambition over the next 3 years is very much to look at how we reach out to these 10 centres and the industries associated with them. So how do we partner? And again, many of you will be familiar with this. Really, we need to speak to all stakeholders and bring them together in a neutral convenings to take this forward. So we really, through this presentation, want to understand how can we partner with you, how can we hear your perspectives, and how can we reflect them. Drilling down into the Centre for Health and Healthcare, within my role, I work across, and these are given by the red ticks, health equity, value-based care, climate and health, and AMR. But overall, across our centre, again, you cannot look at AMR without thinking about data, without thinking about pandemic preparedness, without thinking about gender equity and the fact that women use more antibiotics than men. Very much this needs to have a One Health approach to drive it forward. So how have we been thinking about antimicrobial resistance across the forum? So the journey started 10 years ago with a risk report. And since then, there's been a lot of different projects to look at payment mechanisms, to look at how we are including the investor community. And ahead of the high-level meeting this year, we launched what we call a Global Future Council. Essentially, this is a think tank of 20 people looking at what the World Economic Forum can do. Our Global Future Council has been led by Dame Sally Davis and Tim Jinks from the Wellcome Trust. What we now know is actually we need a much longer programme of work, which we're going to be taking forward in the next 3 years. So what is our plan? So we've had our first time of our Global Future Council, and coming out of it is a Davos Compact, which I'll come on to in a second. We're going to be launching a dedicated initiative on the road to 2029, our annual meeting in Davos in 2025. And this is going to be supported by a second term of the Global Future Council, specifically looking at evidence generation and sustainable financing. So what's the Davos Compact? Essentially, this is a short document that is designed to be the private sector response to the declarations this year. It is being drafted by our Global Future Council in consultation with some key stakeholders at the moment. And in the coming weeks, we're going to be able to share this for review and feedback. Our core mission and approach is really to look at the HLM and what came out of it in terms of driving action by 2030. So what does that look like? And again, this is shared in draft as an indicative structure of what our initiative could look like. If I can draw your attention to the 4 grey blocks, we're looking at 4 engagement tracks overall. One on innovation and access, and that includes antibiotics, diagnostics, and vaccines, and really looking at sustainable financing and in particular pool mechanisms. Our second track, looking at the role of public-private partnership within national action plans. Advocacy and awareness, what we've heard today, is a really important part of how we bring the community together. We find as soon as we step outside of the health bubble, even the term AMR isn't something that always resonates, and we need to make those arguments. And then fourthly, as we've touched on today, it's really critical to look at the role of agro-food in systems as well. And again, in the coming weeks, we're going to be outlining how this will work together. We're very pleased that within our strategic board, Dame Sally has already agreed that she will play a key part in this, and we'll be providing further details at our annual meeting in Davos in 2025. As mentioned, to support our overall initiative, we're having a second term of our Global Future Council that's looking at sustainable financing. What we understand from speaking to our partners is when we talk about what is the need, what's unmet need, actually there aren't many certain figures. So how can we work with the independent panels to look at evidence generation? How much do we need in terms of pool mechanisms? Who would be involved? How do we align them? Will be a part of the co-remit of this Global Future Council. And then finally, as mentioned, really part of our core mission over the next 3 years is how do we take this action and implementation approach to the 22 different industries that we work with, making the economic arguments and keeping them on the radar of all countries, all industries is really critical. The way that we often think about health equity is that when we work with global companies, they're all healthcare companies because they employ people. We learned so much from the pandemic around what the impact was on GDP, but those lessons have often been forgotten. We need to keep that on the agenda. And then finally, some details of how to engage with us. We'd love to have a conversation as we build out this work and actively discuss the Davos Compact in the coming weeks.
Thank you very much, Judith. And I just build on your last word. You would love to work with us and build this. That's exactly what we want. So I hope you will be our emissary, ambassador, whatever title you prefer, in terms of taking the message you've heard here today and how we can actually work with you to advance the AMR agenda together with the WEF partners. Thank you very much. Now I move to our second stakeholder partner. Luca is from the International Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers and Associations. I know in the list of issues that we raised, one of the concerns we have is actually in terms of the pharmaceutical industry. But we have also said this dilemma we have on AMR. One part, it is misuse, and then the other part, we don't even have access to the antibiotics. So in terms of that, if you could reflect a little bit on the role of industry in securing pipeline antibiotics. I know it is a challenge. We have very, very limited antibiotics in the pipeline. So if you could share a little bit on that, over to you, Luca.
Thank you very much, and hello also from my side. And thank you for the invitation to be part of this discussion. So happy to address those points. First, I wanted to sort of just very briefly reflect on sort of where we are at this point in time. I mean, we've heard a lot of good points raised already. We're just coming out of the AMR ministerial meeting in Jeddah. Not 2 months ago, we had the high-level meeting in New York, right, and many more meetings before then, this year and also in the years past. And as was mentioned by several speakers, there are a lot of really sort of concrete and potentially quite impactful proposals coming out of these various meetings in the declaration from September, the commitments from just a few days ago, just to name a few, I think, which are worth repeating, of course, because they really have the potential to change the momentum in the next couple of years, include the proposal for the independent panel. We've heard about the Global Action Plan revision. And we are, I think, now at a point in time where we quite well understand sort of the long-term projections on the potential burden of AMR and all the damage it can cause. 2050 has been an often sort of included milestone in that. But now, sort of in the more short to medium term, the proposal is to have the next high-level meeting in 5 years' time, right? And in between then, we will have 2 more AMR ministerial meetings, one of which in 2026 will be, as was announced, hosted by Nigeria, and then for 28, that is still to be determined. So I think it's going to be really important that, you know, there's a lot of kind of now thinking to be done on the follow-up, on the many different initiatives, including all the, you know, regional proposals that we saw in the Jeddah commitments, which, although have a regional focus in mind, they specifically note the importance of sort of synergizing at the global level. And these can be very, very valuable learnings as we move forward. One of the remarks I remember from one of the discussions in Jeddah was that, you know, somebody said that it is really interesting how we have sort of stopped talking about just the problem itself, but are talking about the actual solutions. And then I reflected on that a little bit. And indeed, I think it was really, you know, a lot of sort of thinking about concrete ways to address the shortcomings. And now I think, you know, it's time to sort of put those solutions to the test and see how far we can come in 5 years' time, essentially. But of course, it was a big year for AMR. We all, you know, understand that. But the work didn't really start this year, right? It's been now 8 years, almost a decade, I guess, since the first high-level meeting. And we saw from, you know, that point onwards how many actually new initiatives either came out of that or continue to grow because of the momentum and attention placed on AMR. For example, the mechanisms to support early stage R&D, right? The push funding mechanisms like CARB-X and GART-P. Also, I'm part of the industry, you know, that was, I think, a clear call to action to us to think about how can we be more concrete in our actions of addressing AMR, which then sort of resulted in a document called the Davos Declaration, which was adopted and sort of endorsed by, you know, many companies spanning the R&D, pharmaceutical industry, the generics, the biotechs, and the diagnostic sector in early 2016. And since then, you know, shortly after, that led to the creation of the AMR Industry Alliance in 2017 at the occasion of the G7 summit, G20 summit in Berlin. And that work has continued, right? The private sector has, you know, through the AMR Industry Alliance, adopted a series of commitments spanning all the kind of key policy areas of AMR, research and science, access, appropriate use, and manufacturing in the environment. And this has led to some very concrete initiatives and progress on these areas, including on manufacturing and the environmental impact there, which we heard about at the very beginning today. And sort of recognizing, you know, kind of moving on to the question that you then asked specifically on R&D and those challenges and access, you know, we clearly can see that the pipeline of antimicrobials in development is sort of trending downwards. And, you know, we have had now in the G7 and the G20 commitments and discussions on the importance of incentivizing investment, right, via push and pull mechanisms, also ensuring that these products can be accessed sustainably. The progress has been seen on that, but it has been slow. And sort of responding to these shortcomings in the funding gap, the industry then also set up the AMR Action Fund in 2020, which is about, you know, almost a $1 billion fund to support clinical development of products. Sort of, you know, the preclinical pipeline is quite diverse actually, and doing somewhat well, but things really become challenging once you move to the later sort of more extensive, more expensive and, you know, challenging stages of development. And the fund is trying to ensure that these products can sort of be developed and you know, launched to market, but it's not going to solve the fundamental issues of new products you know, being developed because of the lack of the aforementioned incentives. So, and this particular, the innovation and access sort of interplay is something we've spent a lot of time also this year thinking about. We can essentially think about it, I would say, as, you know, access to, on the one hand, existing products, and on the other side, access to new or future products, right? When we look at sort of, you know, the antibiotics that currently exist and are available, the essential medicines list has approximately 40 antibiotics on it, which span these different categories of access, watch, and reserve, right, in terms of which should be used most widely and which should be used only when absolutely necessary. The vast majority of these, you know, access and watch, I think pretty much all of them, if not all of them, have been around for decades and, you know, are generic. But we know that access issues do exist there. We know that the supply chain is very fragile. And we've seen this consolidation of the manufacturing and the supply chain, right, to only a handful really of manufacturers globally, which are, usually sort of condensed in just a few sort of geographical regions. And, challenges with that and how to address that will be quite, I think, there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. That's for sure. We think that some of the key actions that could help address that include considering how to achieve a better utilization of regulatory harmonization and reliance, how to sort of ensure that there are appropriate procurement mechanisms in place that can support that sort of access. For example, for lower income settings, pool procurement initiatives could actually be quite helpful. And we know that the Secure has been working on that, and we've had the pleasure of engaging in the Secure initiative. And when we look, for example, at the progress achieved on access in areas like HIV, in the last sort of 15 years, the proportion of patients receiving treatment globally has grown from, I think, 20-something% to 70+%. Importantly, I think it's going to be also a matter of different countries, so G7, G20, and others to sort of play their part as well. G7 and the EU are most often relied on the implementation of pull incentives, which sort of then plays into that kind of continued sustainable development piece that I mentioned before, right? So access to existing antibiotics, but also implementing solutions that will allow us to continue developing products that can then be accessed in the future so that we don't run out, right? G20 countries as well have had a strong focus on this, and we think that there certainly is a role for G20 countries to play here in terms of looking at sort of access enabling reimbursement reforms. And for new products as well, right? I mean, again, there's going to be a difference of volume of use here. Existing antibiotics, used more often and more commonly, whereas the new products will be reserved, used less. So models that can sort of help with that kind of demand visibility and some level of oversight are likely to be preferred. There are examples of partnerships here that have been put in place. Like for one example is for a novel antibiotic which was launched in 2019. And there's a partnership between GARTP, Chai, and Shionogi, the developer, which included a voluntary licensing agreement with as part of it, and also with that transfer of technology. So those that's one option also of trying to increase access, right? So bottom line, I think, is there's a set of interconnected solutions here on access and innovation, right? And again, innovation is really, I think, something that we can talk about as access to future antibiotics. We need to figure out how to strengthen the supply chain for existing antibiotics, ensure that there is that sort of enough manufacturing diversity, that the value of these products is recognized, and that we make sure that we have the right models in place to support lower income setting access. And for new products, absolutely need to progress in the G7 and the EU, the right sort of pull incentives, but also appropriate access models which will fit these sorts of products best. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is fantastic. And these are elements also mentioned in both the access issue and the political declaration, the research component, innovation component, and the same reflected in the Jeddah outcome also. And now I move to our last speaker. Sorry we kept you this long. Catherine, who is the founder, executive director of Health Diplomacy Alliance. And the question basically I wanted to ask is, all this stuff we talked about today, without diplomacy, partnership, it's not going to work. So what is your take on that? In particular, how do we translate all these global commitments from New York to Jeddah into the next one, to Nigeria and beyond? How do we do that? Over to you.
No, thank you very much. And the Health Diplomacy Alliance is quite thrilled to be part of co-organize this event with the Geneva Environmental Network, and we thank them for their support, Diana and the team. If we think about health diplomacy, we have to think about One Health is within the most easy to translate what health diplomacy does. So there is cooperation and collaboration. I mean, I think Javier, he might not like that I use those words, but that's the reality. And that's why for the Health Diplomacy Alliance, if we look at One Health, is within our core focus, is our main focus area. And what we have to see, and I go a little bit back to a few weeks ago, to the high-level meeting in New York, as it was mentioned, we are having a document that is 15-page with 106 point of actions. And if you take each point of action, it's quite difficult to achieve what this ambition political declaration is asking us to do from here to 2029. But we have identified in the Health Diplomacy Alliance 4 areas that we understand that are critical at this moment. So in terms of policy regulation and capacity building, we need to focus on the waste management and environmental regulation that has already been mentioned, the antimicrobial use in agriculture, and the intervention and prevention and control from the health perspective that you have WASH and healthcare associated infections. The finance and the resource mobilization, and this is something that I will come back again, is how we support antimicrobial access and the innovation fund, and how we improve those coordinated financial instruments, right? Including the financial allocation to the national AMR plans and a strategy. Within that, we have the research and development and innovation that has already been mentioned. How do we promote science and policy research? So health diplomacy comes into place there. How we promote public partnership and research and development, and how we promote that in terms of tech transfer at the local and regional productions. It has been mentioned that part of these commitments have already been addressed during the Jeddah commitments. Also, the sustainable production to reduce those environmental risks. And within that, how we surveillance, monitor, and share those data. So we have to promote the national surveillance capacity and reporting, and how we improve that sectoral collaboration and data sharing. And I come back again to this point again, and how we promote the participation of AMR country self-assessment. So this is a little bit how we unpack these 106 points from the high-level committee, high-level meeting in New York. If we look what, I mean, most of us just arrived yesterday or the day before yesterday from Jeddah, and there were 16 vision points as well. A lot of focus on the regional level, but I want to go on the political aspect of it. So one of the good aspect that came from it is the establishment of the Troika, which I think it is a continuing process that would allow us to really to follow up on those commitments that has been established recently. And another aspect is how to maintain this political momentum. We have mentioned that this year has been really significant for AMR, but I think we have the responsibility to continue, and we have to navigate between these geopolitical issues and competing areas that we know they're going to come, and we have already set this kind of commitments and achievement. So I go back to the part that we have identified in terms of research and development. We are to set up in 2025 an independent evidence panel. We have been talking about that we have to establish, but I mix two things. I mix the research and the finance. We need to establish how we're going to finance this panel, how we're going to start the consultation process. So there is a lot of support from the civil society required to support the quadripartite in terms of the consultation process, and how we mobilize the resources for not only the consultation, but the establishment of an independent panel that will not be policy prescriptive, but it will be independently enough to be able to, that we are able to define its scope, its governance structure, and the knowledge and the national data that we require that is sometimes complicated. And I go back into why we need to tackle the financial aspect of it. We have ambitious goals, but we need to find a financial mechanism to be able to tackle those goals. And civil society comes into play in terms of, and this is something that from the Health Diplomacy Alliance, we're gonna be really focusing in the next years, is as we see what happens between the ministerial till 2029. And internally, we call it the checkpoint. So we need to do a checkpoint for monitoring and accountability of what is happening and what we are doing in terms of committing of those areas from our own responsibility. And we need to engage civil society in that. We need to engage youth, we need to engage community, and we need to engage survivors. So health diplomacy comes into place for really tackling and monitoring those those issues. And we are happy to support in that sense the work that the quadripartite is having now, especially for the establishment of the panel and also for the work ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Judith. I know we're just running out of time. There are a few questions online, so maybe I will ask one or two of them, and then. Oh, is she online? Ah, okay, excellent. This ex-Georgian member of parliament. Oh, madam, welcome to our panel, and please, over to you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Greetings to colleagues. It was wonderful to meet many of the panelists in Jeddah, as well as the high-level meeting on AMR. My intervention will be very brief. I know we're running out of time, but as the CEO of the Global Sepsis Alliance, first of all, I would like to applaud the historic progress we have made as the global health community in positioning antimicrobial resistance on high-level political discussions. However, from the high-level meeting on AMR at the UN General Assembly to the Jeddah commitments, we see consistently that sepsis, that is the major killer of children, women, and men, has not been given adequate attention in the AMR discussions. And the primary reason for us to advocating for sepsis is the famous 4.95 million annual deaths that are attributable to or associated with antimicrobial resistance. They are only 36% of the annual sepsis-related deaths. AMR deaths are sepsis-related deaths. Lives lost to AMR are the lives lost in children, women, and men who are suffering from sepsis. So my first message AMR advocacy, policy dialogue, and actions and solutions with sepsis-related dialogue. And my third message is that in September 2024, we launched the first global strategy for sepsis. It is called 2030 Global Agenda for Sepsis. It was launched at the German Parliament with the support of the WHO and the official video address from Dr. Tedros, as well as Regional Director for Europe, Dr. Hans Klug. And we ask you to join the 2030 Global Agenda for Sepsis. You will see the critical elements of sepsis and AMR linkages that we have to consistently position in our multilateral discussions and global health agenda. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Miriam Gashi. She's the CEO of the Global Sepsis Alliance, but also former member of parliament and deputy health minister of Georgia. Thank you so much for that. Now we have, okay. So we have a couple of questions, maybe. I'll start with, there's one question for FAO. Antibiotics resistance and fishes, bees, and their products. Is there something FAO doing in terms of that?
Yes, yes, we are. Well, I will not be able to provide much detail on that, but we have a. If I understand your question, is about on use in fisheries and in beekeeping.
Yeah.
I mean, these are two topics that are indeed on the agenda of FAO, and as part of the One Health corporate work that we do, and in the context of AMR in particular, we have indeed the fisheries division of FAO being involved in that, and the division dealing with beekeeping as well. So the short answer is yes, and happy to provide more information and details on that.
Thank you, Dominic. And there's a second question, maybe this I'll direct it to WHO. It says, how is the quadripartite helping countries to prioritize interventions given resource constraints?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So I think one way to go about it first is to draft a plan, and we've seen that most of the countries have now developed plans. Actually, beyond 170 countries have the national action plans, but you've been hearing about lack of funding and lack of implementation. So what the quadripartite is trying to do, one, we have undertaken a study to determine which priority intervention should be looked at or should be considered across the One Health sectors. So we'll be availing those soon to the countries. Second, we are also working on developing some prioritization tools, costing tools, impact estimation tools to help to do all of that. But we always keep emphasizing on the ownership at the local level. So we really mainly advocate for the countries themselves, consulting some stakeholders group to look into this together. And then the quadripartite comes in to build the capacity and support the use of, using all of these tools that we put together.
Is online? Javier? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
One question for you. What is your relationship with the pharmaceutical industry?
What is our relationship?
Yeah.
That's the question.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we have a memorandum of understanding with the association, which is gathering the main pharmaceutical industries in the animal health space. And this is one of the many of the 70 memoranda of understanding that we have with different partners. We have also these kind of partnerships with the associations representing the poultry production, the meat secretariat, the egg council, etc. And so our relationships are based on exchange of information and working together in transforming our international standards into actions in the field. And to that respect, we are going to strengthen this dialogue and communication with them based on the results mentioned on the report that I mentioned before on the consequences of AMR in food-producing animals. So the gaps that we observe today in the implementation of standards can be closed. And I was mentioning one of them is the use of antimicrobials as growth promoters. So I do not know if this is because, I mean, the question is quite broad. What is your relationship with the pharmaceutical industry? I mean, we talk and we provide elements so that they comply also with our international standards as many other stakeholders.
Thank you, Javier. And then one last question, maybe for UNEP. Maybe on wastewater, if I may ask, what is UNEP doing in terms of wastewater, the link between wastewater and AMR?
Yes, thank you. Apologies because Jacqueline needed to leave. But UNEP has been working on wastewater on several other aspects, and they are looking into pollutants, different pollutants. And now what we are doing is to connect the dots. And as we were mentioning, Jacqueline in her intervention mentioned, we are working mainly focusing on the prevention to avoid the waste. But once the waste is there, how we can help the different settings in treating and making trying to find solutions to that wastewater, having the AMR perspective well integrated. So it's linking, it's work in progress, and of course understanding that the different settings have different needs. So trying to see which are the different countries' needs to adequate the responses. Thank you.
Thank you. Should I give the floor to no? We've almost run out of time, but what I will do is I give every panelist 30 seconds. If they have anything to add, anything they missed out, this is your chance.
30 seconds to him.
Okay. So you get the first 30 seconds.
Thank you very much. We all know that AMR is a huge problem in wastewater treatment, especially domestic, because they were designed in the 1980s, and back then we didn't consider that as a factor. However, pharmaceutical wastewater alone, due to processing and the nature of waste, is really hard. How do you guys think to advance somehow the treatment process? And if you're looking to augmentation or other type of biotechnologies that could help eventually reduce the water effluent criteria?
Thank you. As I mentioned, there are different ways of addressing it. One is we are trying to work closer with the manufacturing sites, and this is with the AMR Industry Alliance, their standards, etc. In parallel, also strengthening the regulations, but also in countries where there is not even wastewater, we need to be very conscious of the different settings. This is what I was mentioning. So it's addressing the needs depending on the country's priorities. So trying to find which are the solutions and partnering also with research institutions to see which are the different, and sometimes it's a stepwise process. So not all solutions can be applied to every country. Yeah.
Thank you very, very much. I hate to break the rules. Last question, Cyril, and then that's it.
Okay. Good morning, colleagues. Mine is not a question, but rather, let's say, comment or testimony. I think that the international and the global aspect of the antimicrobial resistance should not be forgotten. I just want to share one example which has occurred in Kenya, actually, at the border between Kenya and Uganda, where, as GP and Dominic mentioned, the 4th generation quinolone antibiotics, which is actually in terms of tool to really treat it, infections, they found that some resistance that they have observed on the Uganda side also started being seen in a region called Kisumu in Kenya, where there is a high poultry activity, a high agricultural, and also now a high use of antibiotics because of informal sector, etc. So I think, just to reflect on what the whole group actually says as a message, as we move forward in this region in particular and we lead this agenda, we should remember that the reason why the General Assembly made a decision was the global aspect of the approach that we need to have. So as we are discussing, the awareness raising, the communication sector, we should also reflect on how can this message also being shared with those who do not have the same level of understanding, the same tool, the same access to informations. And I think that this is really where the benefit of this type of reflection can really benefit to the global. We have to remember what COVID has taught us. We cannot address the issues of global threat like this, in the silos. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you, Cyril. Judith, 30 seconds.
I would say partnering, action, implementation. We know what we need to do, and we have 5 years to do it. So I think as we would love to speak to everyone in this room, everyone online, how can we work together?
Very much. Javier on screen.
Yes, getting out of the mute. Nothing really to add to that. It has already been said. Maybe one comment, totally in agreement of this, that this is a global problem. I would be very cautious on making links of causality between presence of farms and appearance of resistance. However, I would encourage all these elements to be watched and to do research so that we can establish the links as well as continue to use antimicrobials responsibly in every sector. But making links of causality without evidence can bring us back to the blame, shame, pointing fingers attitude that has not been proved to be successful in the past. So
thank you, Javier. Dominic.
Very, very briefly to say we are in World AMR Awareness Week. A week is not enough. Should be every week that we work on that. We are at we have done a lot. I mean, the community, I mean, compared to a couple of years ago, has done a lot, but we are still at the very beginning, and we definitely need to scale up efforts at all levels to make sure it happens.
Thank you, Dominic. Thank you, Dominic. Catherine?
Briefly, yes, I go on the act now of the Awareness Week and how to say the importance of multilateralism, and here being at Geneva International, how important it is to continue the conversation in AMR. Thank you.
Luca?
Thank you. Thank you again for the invitation for this, this very timely discussion. I really like what Dominic said, that, AMR awareness it's not just a week, it's a state of mind, right? Really need to ensure that it stays high up on the agenda. Just wanted to flag that we've also developed some publications in the last couple of months on the pipeline and access questions. Happy to talk about those or share a copy, and thank you all very much.
Very much. Atsibe, UNEP.
Thank you. Coordinated, multisectoral plus sector-specific interventions with prevention at the core. Thank you.
I know JP doesn't want to speak, but I still give you one last chance to change your mind.
Thank you so much. I mean, maybe just to end with a note of positivity. I mean, you always encourage when you fight something that you probably know you will win, and it's possible that we can really save these lives that are being lost and, safeguard our economy and protect the environment. So it's doable. Let's just be encouraged. Let's act and act now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My closing remark would be a big thank you to Jen, but also a kind of a challenge to Jen. This is an important issue, life-saving issue, and I would sincerely hope that we will organize this. It will not be just an event after a political declaration or a big conference, but I think you will systematically include it in the program work of Jen, so that we continue this conversation and continue to save lives. 3 people every minute, that is shocking. And I think we need to ensure that this conversation continues. And thank you very much.